to our show that is called Real Shame, where we watch movies that we haven't watched and probably should have seen, and then we talk about them. And I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
And this week we have two movies that I haven't seen, but before we jump into that, we always like to catch up and see what we've been watching. So, Andy, what have you been watching?
I think last week, or a couple of weeks ago, rather, you were watching the Fast and Furious movies.
I did.
I did the same, just like you, in preparation for. At some point, one of these days, we'll watch Fast 9, but we still haven't watched it at this time. Not that it's like the most anticipated movie of the year or anything like that, obviously.
Because it is.
Yeah. But I mean, I watched them all. I watched Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, I don't think you skipped a couple.
I didn't skip any. I like them all in their own little way. I think like I don't mind any of them. I think some people are kind of down on the second one, Too Fast, Too Furious, and probably some other ones. Well, some people think that I know. Pick a movie in the Fast and Furious franchise, and there's going to be plenty of people out there that's their favorite one. And I know there's some people that Tokyo Drift is their favorite one, which
it's Justin Lin's first Fast and Furious movie, and
I mean, and that's cool, but it's strange to me that would be people's first one, because like me, like Lucas Black's accent is so in everything he's ever done, but I mean in Tokyo Drift, like hearing him go Gaijin and Wabakashi is enough to make my ears want to bleed. I think my favorite part in Tokyo Drift is when Bow Wow, he's not little Bow Wow, he's Bow Wow in that movie. He's still little, but he's no longer little Bow Wow. I think my favorite part is when he goes, "Do you even know what DK stands for?" And Lucas Black is like, Donkey Kong. So that's how I like to say Donkey Kong now.
I think that's the only.
Hey, do you want to go play some Donkey Kong?
I think that's the only appropriate way to say Donkey Kong.
I think it is. But anyway, the Fast and Furious movies are enjoyable for what they are, mostly, which is progressively sillier as the series goes along and more ridiculous.
Did you have a standout on this watching that you liked?
I mean, I think which did you say was your favorite? Do you remember?
It jumps between 4 and 5. I think last time around 5 was my favorite.
Yeah, I think 5 and 6 are my two favorite, and probably 5 is my favorite as well. I'm not as big on 4. I don't really like that villain Braga. I don't think he's. I think
he's not really big in 4 though.
He's weak. Well, for the longest time. Well, I don't want to spoil it because we're not reviewing those movies, but we could talk about it afterwards. But in addition, speaking of Justin Lin, in addition to the Fast and Furious movies, I watched Better Luck Tomorrow, which is Justin Lin's second film, not his first film. But it was good. It's has no relation. It's not part of the Fast and Furious universe, but could be, maybe. Sung Kang, who plays Han, I believe that's his name. He plays Han in the Fast and Furious movies, plays the character named Han in Better Luck Tomorrow, and
that's all I need.
He's kind of a cool, aloof kind of guy in Better Luck Tomorrow, and he drives a classic Mustang in Better Luck Tomorrow. So it could. However, there's another character in Better Luck Tomorrow. I think the guy's name is Jason Tobin or Justin Tobin. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't write it down. He's in Tokyo Drift, but he's a different character in Tokyo Drift.
You could have
the same character.
We've had crazier things happen. We could be a twin brother.
That's true. But he also talks with an English accent in Tokyo Drift, and he doesn't in Better Luck Tomorrow.
Could have English-born twin brother.
Maybe.
Separated at birth, different continents.
But Better Luck Tomorrow, it's a little rough around the edges, but I thought it was a good movie. There's a few things that I was a little iffy on, but it's a cool, like, very stylish indie film back when indie films were still indie films, and they were a reason to get excited about, and it was shot on film. Most indie films now are shot digitally because it's cheaper. Obviously, I don't blame them, but I'd say it's worth checking out if you like Justin Lin's movies, and who doesn't? Well, maybe not the G.I. Joe movie that he did, but Better Luck Tomorrow is worth checking out. All right,
that's been on my list to watch for a while. I have yet to watch it.
Yeah, and it's actually we were just looking at Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime. I didn't watch it on Amazon Prime, but if you have Amazon Prime, you can check it out. What have you been watching?
So I just want to highlight a trilogy that I watched that came out on Netflix. Originally, this trilogy was supposed to be, I read, come out in the movie theaters once a month, one movie per month over the course of the summer.
Okay.
But because of COVID and everything like that, it kind of all got changed. So it came out in 3 consecutive weeks on Netflix, and that is the Fear Street trilogy. They're based off the R.L. Stine Fear Street books, series of books.
Oh, okay.
It's all directed by one lady and I think written by one person, and they all kind of form together as just one big narrative. They're released in parts. So you have Fear Street in 1994, then you have Fear Street Part 2, 1978, then you have Fear Street Part 3, 1666. And I've seen a couple of different reviews and different things on it, but once you get into the vibe of what this is trying to do, I think it's pretty good. It's not going to be like a Scream or like a really elevated kind of, like Scream is kind of meta, but it's also a very good horror film. I don't think this is not really aiming for that. It's more like of a step down, like a Stranger Things, a little bit of CW vibe to it. It's more kiddish. It's not as serious, but we had a lot of fun watching it. We watched them all consecutively, which helped. And once you get on the vibe of what it's trying to do, it's pretty good. And some of the maiming and the kills are pretty fun and pretty interesting. And some of the baddies look pretty cool. And like I said, I enjoyed it for the most part.
Cool.
So that's kind of what we watched. We watched the Fear Street trilogy. So I'd say if you have a couple hours, probably 6 hours maybe to spend
2 to 6 hours.
2 to 6 hours, I'd say I'd check it out. I will say in the marketing on it, they say that each episode stands alone, and that is false. That is
not true.
Completely false. They do not stand alone. They are a series. Okay. And once you get to the second movie, you kind of understand the format that they're going for. But I recommend it. It's one of those things that a few pieces of it I really want to check out. The opening scene with like Maya Hawke is really good and really evocative. So I like that a whole bunch.
Cool.
So that's what I've been watching. So let's get into our feature review. And again, movie I haven't seen, but that movie is
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Pew, pew. Robert Leroy Parker and Harry Alonzo Longabaugh were real-life outlaws in the late 1800s and early 1900s who, along with their gang, the Wild Bunch, robbed banks and trains and generally raised hell, sometimes along with Harry's female companion, Miss Etta Place. Robert Leroy Parker and Harry Alonzo Longabaugh are better known by their aliases Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Kid, the next time I say let's go someplace like Bolivia, let's go someplace like Bolivia.
Next time. Ready?
No, we'll jump.
Like hell we will.
No, it'll be okay. If the water's deep enough, we don't get squished to death. They'll never follow us.
How do you know?
Would you make a jump like that and you didn't have to?
I have to, and I'm not gonna.
Well, we got to, otherwise we're dead. They're just gonna have to go back down the same way they come. Come on.
Just one clear shot, that's all I want.
Come on. We got to.
Nope. Get away from me.
Why?
I want to fight them.
They'll kill us.
Maybe.
You want to die?
Do you?
All right. I'll jump first.
Nope.
Then you jump first.
No, I said.
What's the matter with you?
I can't swim.
Why, are you crazy? The fall will probably kill you.
So Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was directed by George Roy Hill. He did The World According to Garp, which we reviewed last year. It was written by a guy named William Goldman. William Goldman was a novelist as well as a screenwriter, and many times he adapted his own novels as screenplays when they were brought to the screen. He did after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was actually the first screenplay that he ever did. But he did All the President's Men a few years later. with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. He won an Academy Award, his second Academy Award for that. That same year, 1976, he adapted his own novel, Marathon Man, to the screen, also starring Dustin Hoffman. And he did both the novel and the screenplay for another book movie that you probably have heard of called The Princess Bride. Immensely popular.
Yep. It's very good.
But yeah, he wrote the book as well as the screenplay for that film. It was shot by Conrad Hall. Conrad Hall had worked with Paul Newman on Harper, as well as Cool Hand Luke just 2 years prior to this. And then later in his career, he did, just before he passed, he did American Beauty. And I think his final film was Road to Perdition, which also has Paul Newman.
Yep.
Coincidentally enough. But it was shot in Utah, Colorado, Old Mexico, in other words, Mexico the country, and New Mexico the state. Shot all over. Stars Paul Newman as Butch Cassidy, Robert Redford as the Sundance Kid. This was the first of 2 teamings that they did. They did 2 films together. Catherine Ross, who we saw in The Graduate, back in episode number 3, plays Etta Place. Strother Martin, who had been with Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke 2 years before, and who got to utter the famous line, "What we've got here is failure to communicate." He is in this, but he's not in it for very long. Cloris Leachman has a bit part. Ted Cassidy, the guy who played Lurch on the Addams Family, very tall. Ted Cassidy is part of they're known as the Hole in the Wall gang in the movie, not the Wild Bunch, because the Wild Bunch movie came out the same year as Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, and they figured it would be too confusing to call them the Wild Bunch. This is what they were called in real life, so they're known as the Hole in the Wall gang. But Ted Cassidy is a member of his gang, and Sam Elliott is in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but don't look for him because you won't see his face. He is one of the 2 card players that is playing cards with Robert Redford at the beginning of the film, and he leaves pretty quickly when Robert Redford or Sundance Kid is accused of cheating. But you only see like his back, and it's in very tight close up.
I wanted to go back because I read on IMDb that he was on here.
Yeah,
I wanted to go back and find his cameo, but it's good to know that it would be near impossible to find.
Right, you don't see him, and honestly, I didn't recognize his voice either. So I didn't know it was Sam Elliott until I read that he was in the cast. I was like, "What? It is?" But this is a movie that I've seen quite a few times actually. So who knows what viewing this is for me? But it's a movie you've never seen.
Nope.
And I think the last Western we did was Magnificent Seven.
Might have been,
if memory serves. So it's been a minute since we did a Western, so I thought it was time to do a Western. So, what did you think, or what did you know about Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid? Not the Real Life Outlaws, but the movie. or maybe what did you know about the Real Life Outlaws? I don't know. I know very little. I know more now that I did some research. And what did you think of the movie?
So I think the one thing that stands out from this movie that I think it's been in the cultural zeitgeist is the singing in the rain, or not singing in the rain, the raindrops keep falling on my head, right? Yeah. So I remember that being parodied in like the Lethal Weapon movies, and it's been parodied a whole lot of places. So so I knew when I saw when I saw the bicycle and all that kind of stuff when they're picking up Etta, I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna do this part, right?
Yeah.
So that I actually really like this movie a whole lot. That being said, I think it's real. You hear about like charisma and all that kind of stuff, and I just feel like I want to call him Tom Newman. Paul Newman and Robert Redford just ooze charisma.
Yeah, they do.
Right, and it's just like they're so likable and they're so affable that is just like it brings you on board with the whole movie, and just it's really interesting and really, really fun to watch. So I really enjoyed this whole journey with them on the movie. It started out in sepia tone, which I was like, I didn't know this movie was going to be like in black and white. And I'm like, that's an interesting color choice. But then as they progress on, they it goes to color, and you're like, okay. But I think they're like the dialogue they have, their interactions with it. I mean, they're outlaws, but they're not like bad people, right?
Right.
Because they're talking to the guy that is watching over the money, and they're like, come on, dude, just like we're gonna rob you. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to
woodcock.
Yeah, woodcock, right? Yeah. And like even like the conductors of the train like get off and want to see them do it.
Hey, I just want to watch.
Yeah. So and even like when they get woodcock the second time around, they're like holding the lady hostage. They're not really like hurting her or anything like that. So like that. So there's a lot to like enjoy about them and all that kind of stuff in this movie. And then you kind of get like a little bit at the end where Paul Newman's like, I thought you spoke Spanish, and he's like, all that kind of stuff. So it's just like one of those, it's like hanging out with your best friends kind of movie, right? And so I really like that aspect of it, of just like being on this ride with them and seeing them and that kind of stuff. I will say the raindrops keep falling on my head. Maybe it's because of all the stuff I've seen before that, but that whole scene just seems random and just kitschy, and it just doesn't feel. Oh, you forgot to turn your phone off.
Oh, I did.
That's
Sorry.
all right. Just doesn't feel like it flows with the whole movie.
Yeah.
So like, and then there's the other picture montages, like when they're traveling to is it Bolivia?
Yeah, that's where they end up.
With like all that picture montage, like of them on like the steam engine and celebrating New Year's and stuff like that. Like that raindrops keep falling on my head, and those scenes are just they don't add a lot to the movie to me, and I feel like they take it away. And like those scenes, I wanted to see it because I like spending time with the characters so much. I wanted to see their journey down to Bolivia and all that kind of stuff. Like I wanted to spend more time with them rather than get a whole bunch of like pictures of them together with like Burt Bacharach's groovy music playing over it and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as much as I like this movie, I really wish it didn't have those scenes, because I feel like those scenes took away some of the they took the place of something that could have been more fun and more interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how well that played in. When did this movie come out? In 1969. So maybe it played a little bit better. Maybe it was interesting and captivating. But for me, those were like the biggest disappointments for the movie for me, right? So that's kind of where I sit on Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid. So you said you've seen this, sounds like numerous times. Would you think about the movie going into this, and how was it this time around?
I loved this movie. When I was younger, I showed it to a lot of people. I remember renting it several times and showing it to different people, and was generally a really, really big fan of this film. Interestingly enough, this time around, I didn't like it nearly as much.
Oh.
I still do like this film. It's kind of like The Graduate, and it's fitting, I think, that Catherine Ross is in both movies. I feel about the same as I do about The Graduate. I still think the film is good, and I still enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I did a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. The chemistry between Paul Newman and Robert Redford is amazing, and they're both very funny, and they're fun to watch in this film. And I think that's what makes the movie. Yeah. One of my big problems with the movie is the score by Burt Bacharach, and I really liked it when I was younger, but now it's so jarring to me because it is very groovy and 60s, and even I wrote down, even the font of the movie is kind of like a 60s looking kind of font. I think this movie is very much a product of its time, just like The Graduate is very much a product of its time, with all the Simon and Garfunkel songs. And I know, they grated on your nerves.
What about
they seem to play those over and over.
Maybe think of Wednesday's movie, but we'll get to that in a second.
But the score, interestingly enough, again, I used to really like the score. I would say I like the score. I just don't really like it in this movie.
Yeah.
Like I could listen to it maybe standalone, but when they're going through Bolivia, there's kind of a montage with the police chasing and the soldiers chasing them and everything, and you've got like this scat singing kind of stuff, like sounds like the Free Design or somebody.
Yeah, it didn't fit.
It's very weird, and again, it's just because this movie came out in the late 1960s. I mean, there's another movie that came out in the late 60s called Charlie, which I think suffers the same fate. It's a movie that I still like even as an adult, but some of the choices that they make are very 60s influenced, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that aspect of it. So I'm not a big fan of that. I also don't remember that whole kind of, because they get chased by Lord Baltimore's the name of the tracker, which somebody on IMDb thought they said Lord Voldemort was the name of the tracker. I was like, no, it's Lord Baltimore. And LaFours, which is the guy in the white straw hat. In real life, they were chased by the Pinkerton Detective Agency. They never call them that in this movie. Mm-hmm. They just say it's LaFours chasing us or whatever. But that whole first part where they're kind of getting chased goes on forever, I feel like, before they finally make it back to Etta, and then they decide to go to Bolivia, and then they have that montage of them on the steamship. I'm not crazy about that either.
No. But then the other thing is, sorry, you're on this.
Yeah.
Is like when they're in Bolivia, they think LaFours is after them again, but
Yeah.
I didn't get that connection. Like I didn't know, because I didn't see a guy in the white straw hat or anything like that.
They do see a guy in a white straw hat, and they think LaFours is still after them, and that's why they're like, well, he can't get us if we don't commit another crime, so let's go straight.
Which I thought was awesome too.
Yeah.
Like I liked that whole scene, and then like that guy they were working for seemed pretty cool. Like he had a great introduction because just the way he is and is like he's such a personality, and also like he's dead.
yeah. That's Trevor Martin. He's like, can you shoot? And he's like, oh yeah.
And then he's like, I gotta move.
Yeah, I gotta move whenever I shoot.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, they're not violent criminals. In fact, they only kill people towards the end of the film.
Well, and was it Paul Newman says? No, it's not. It's Paul Redford says he's never killed someone.
I think Paul Newman says that.
It was Paul Newman. Yeah. They said like
I've never killed anybody.
Yep.
Yeah. And that they're forced to kill the guys that stole the money, stole the payroll. And that part, I really like kind of the drama of that scene because you could tell it weighs heavily on them. And then of course there's the final climactic shootout where they killed quite a few people.
And it kind of goes like all Wild Bunchy a little bit in the end.
Yeah.
Just like the way the movie ends. But I think that's just a product of when it came out and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like the ending. I like the kind of basically the whole part. I mean, I like the movie overall. Don't get me wrong. Just like The Graduate, like I say, I'm still a fan of this movie. I'm just not as enthusiastic about it this go round.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I'm just more cranky or something in my older age or whatever. But I didn't enjoy it as much. I found the soundtrack. I like the song "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head," but I, like you, thought that it's just a weird bicycle scene, and again, just seems very 60s to me, as well as the whole score by Burt Bacharach. And again, the score's not bad. It's just in this movie, to me, it's just kind of a weird choice.
Yeah, and I think if they built more out of like I'm calling him everything. Paul Newman's and was it Ella Place's relationship would have been a little bit more interesting because, like, it seems almost scandalous that, Robert Redford's sleeping in bed, but he's all like, driving around like first date kind of stuff with her and stuff like that. But they don't really do much with that other than say that she's sitting on, I think, Robert Redford's lap and says, what would have happened if we would have met first or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think. So it seems so random and just so jarring and doesn't feel like it's a part of the whole,
Well, I find that scene interesting where Robert Redford is in her house when she comes home from the school or whatever.
Yeah, he's like
he pulls Neil Breen did the same thing in Twisted Pair where he pretends like
True Lies too.
True Lies. But so basically, because if you're seeing this movie for the first time, and obviously we're spoiling it, so hopefully you've already seen it if you're listening to us talk about it. But if you're seeing the movie for the first time, you think he may have broken into her house and he's like forcing her to strip at gunpoint, a loaded gun. That's not good gun safety, boys and girls.
No.
Because he does like point it basically right at her, and I'm pretty sure it's loaded. So I'm just like, what's it? But then you find out that he actually knows her. They have a relationship because she's like, just once, I wish you'd get here on time. And you're like, oh, okay, he's not some crazy psychopath that broke into her house and is forcing her to strip.
Yeah, I kind of was in on it because I think I've seen so many movies that use that kind of, that have a scene like that where I was just like, okay, wait, I know they're dating.
Right.
But I totally see where you're coming from and all that kind of stuff.
It's just, I mean, again, the scene doesn't bother me. I just was like, he's pointing a gun at her. Like, anyway.
It's their role play, man. Don't
it is their role play.
Don't kink shame them.
I'm not kink shaming them, not at all. But but again, I do like the movie. I think that part where they're getting chased by LaFours goes on really long time. But of course, it does culminate in the funny scene where they jump from the cliff into the river, which I think is really funny and is a cool scene or whatever. He's like, I can't swim, and I think that clip has been shown a lot where they both jump, But the movie's good overall. Again, I just maybe not as crazy about it as I once was, unfortunately. So, but I'm glad that you liked it.
Yeah, I did.
I'm glad.
It makes me wish we watched more westerns. Just because
we'll get on that.
we're doing we've been batting 100. Batting 1,000? I don't know what this phrase.
Yeah, batting 1,000 with Magnificent Seven and Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Yeah. At this point, I'd take Magnificent Seven over Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I never thought I'd say that, but again, I still would recommend this movie.
And Magnificent's a really, really good movie.
It's excellent.
And there's a reason why it's been remade like 40 million times.
Right. Right. So this was, as I mentioned, the first screenplay for William Goldman. He was paid a whopping $400,000 for this screenplay, which I believe, and it was his first screenplay.
That's still pretty good money.
I was gonna say at the time, I think I read that it was the highest sum of money paid at that time for a screenplay. So he definitely got a lot out of it. It was the top grossing film period for 1969. So this was an immensely popular film when it came
Beat
out.
out Wild Bunch.
Yeah, it did beat out Wild Bunch. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound. It did not win any of those. 1969 was the year that Midnight Cowboy won Best Picture, and that movie was rated X, at least at the time. It's since been rated R because it's pretty tame by today's standards. But it did win Original Screenplay, so William Goldman won his first Academy Award for this movie. His second, as I mentioned earlier, came for All the President's Men. It won for Best Cinematography by Conrad Hall, and I do think the cinematography is beautiful, like all the vistas of Utah and Colorado and Mexico and New Mexico. Original score, Burt Bacharach's original score did win. And the Best Original Song, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, won an Oscar. Yes, sung by B.J. Thomas. It is number 73 on AFI's Top 100 Movies, and AFI also does a top 10 of genres. It's the number 7 Western film out of the top 10 Westerns. Incidentally, Godfather and Godfather 2 are 1 and 3 on their top 10 gangster movies.
I thought you were going to say Westerns. I'm like, oh, what?
No, they're number 1 and number 3. Number 2 is Goodfellas on their top 10 gangster movies, and Vertigo is number 1 on their top mystery films. So we've done all those on the show. And King Kong's also somewhere on their fantasy list. I forget what number it is. So in the movie, when they go straight and they're doing the payroll, guarding the payroll, they go under the aliases of Smith and Jones because they can't remember who's who. Whenever Strother Martin is like, "Hey, Jones," or whatever, come help me with this. He's like, "Which one am I?" Just a couple of years after this, there was a television show, a Western television show called Alias Smith and Jones, although it has nothing to do with Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, but it did have 2 outlaws that were Alias Smith and Jones. It was a short-lived TV show. Later on, in the late 70s, there was a prequel called Butch and Sundance, The Early Years. It stars Tom Berenger and, Tom Berenger of The Substitute fame and Sniper. The Substitute, which has probably the best fart scene of all of cinema history.
For real?
Yes.
Look
on YouTube, Tom Berenger, The Substitute fart scene. Look that up on YouTube, and you won't be sorry. And William Catt is the great who was the greatest American hero. They're Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I think William Catt
Does he
is
still
Butch
have
Cassidy.
his curly blonde hair?
I don't know. And Tom Berenger, Sundance. I may have it reversed, but Christopher Lloyd, Doc Brown is in it.
All right.
Peter Weller, RoboCop is in it. Brian Dennehy, weird-looking Vincent Schiavelli, who was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and a lot of other stuff, he's in it. And Jeff Corey, who was Sheriff Bledsoe in the original film, is the only person who's in the prequel that was in the original film. He plays the same Bledsoe character.
Crazy.
Also, in 1976, I believe, there was a TV movie called Wanted: The Sundance Woman, which has Catherine Ross reprising her role as Etta Place.
Oh, cool.
So it's basically her life after Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid were killed. And in real life, were they really killed? There's kind of not a conspiracy theory, but there is, because I think their bodies were never positively identified because they were killed down in Bolivia. So it's like, was it them? Was it not them? There's a rumor that one or both of them might have survived and moved back to America and lived out their days in old age. There's even some movies dealing with that. One is Blackthorn, I think is what it's called, with Sam Shepard, where he's an old Butch Cassidy living out his days in the U.S.
They're hanging out with Elvis and Tupac.
They're hanging out with Elvis and Tupac. Sundance Kid. Sundance was such a popular name to Robert Redford. He founded the Sundance Film Institute, which does the Sundance Film Festival every January.
I've been there.
And there is a Mallrats connection to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You know what it is.
I don't.
Sven Ole Thorson, who's Arnold Schwarzenegger's buddy, plays LaFours in that movie, and he wears a white straw hat. He's the security guard. So, yes, there's a connection between, of all things, Mallrats and
I got
Butch
that.
Cassidy
I now
and
get
Sundance
that.
Kid.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Because LaFours is chasing them the whole movie,
Yeah.
and he's got a white straw hat.
That's actually pretty smart.
Kevin Smith is a Butch Cassidy fan, apparently. It's 88% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 92% audience score. Roger Ebert was not that hot on the film. He gave it 2.5 stars. But Leonard Maltin loves it. He gives it 4 stars.
All right.
So
what did we decide to pair this with?
at first, I considered doing another Western, but then I thought, you know what? Redford and Newman did only one other film. So it's only fitting that we do their other movie that they did together, directed by the same guy that directed this one, George Roy Hill, and it's The Sting. We'll talk about that next time.
Stay tuned for Wednesday when we go into The Sting. All right, guys, Sting. Now it's your turn. Let us know what you think about Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. Did we get it right or did we get it wrong? Let us know down below if you're watching us YouTube, or shoot us an email, realshame@gmail.com. We also answer viewer questions that are sent to that email address, so please send us your viewer questions. Again, that's realshame@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, share, do all that social media stuff, because we do appreciate that and it does help spread the word of the podcast, of the show and the podcast, whatever you want to call it. Speaking of social media, we're also on Instagram. You can follow us there at Real Shame. And stay tuned when we figure out whether the sting stung or stunk. We'll see you soon, guys. Bye.